United States Amateur Championship. The oldest golf championship contested in the United States. Since 1895, the best amateurs in the world competed against each other for the chance to have their names engraved on the Havemeyer Trophy. 7,749 players submitted an entry form to compete in this year's U.S. Amateur. Most would have to endure a 36-hole qualifier at one of the 94 qualifying sites across the country. If you could outperform your competition and find some luck along the way, you'd get the opportunity to compete for the greatest trophy in amateur golf. The final field of the U.S. Am is set at 312 players. State amateur champions, junior phenoms, collegiate All-Americans, and some that are already USGA champions. After 36 holes of stroke play, 64 players advance to match play. From there, it's real simple. Beat the man in front of you. Lose, and you go home. Left to dwell on your misfortune for an entire year. This year, the Ridgewood Country Club in Paramus, New Jersey would serve as host of the United States Amateur Championship. Tasked as the stroke play co-host venue would be Arcola Country Club, just 10 minutes by car down Paramus Road. The world of amateur golf would focus on New Jersey, as the chase for the Havemeyer Trophy would conclude on Sunday in a 36-hole championship match. For Ridgewood, this week is the culmination of 3 years of hard work and dedication from the professional staff, the grounds crew, and the membership. Kevin Shea, Championship Committee co-chair, was quick to acknowledge that it took a collective effort to reach this point.
Well, it is a team effort, obviously. We have an incredible group of talented managers, hardworking employees, and a really, truly committed board and membership. We have over 550 volunteers. We had a wait list at the end of it. We just get a lot of inspiration from each other and the USGA family all behind us, helping us. We're ready, and it's going to be amazing.
The Ridgewood Country Club's 27 holes were designed by none other than A.W. Tillinghast, nearly 100 years ago in 1929. But there is more to the history of Ridgewood than meets the eye, especially when you consider the fact that the origins of the club itself lie elsewhere.
Well, Ridgewood Country Club didn't start at this location. It was actually in 2 separate locations in Ridgewood. Before that, it was the Hohokus Golf Club, and it was in Hohokus, a tiny little town just north of Ridgewood. It moved to the present location of the municipal facility in Ridgewood, which is Veterans Field now, and it was a little flat golf course that was bisected by the Hohokus Brook. And then it moved to Upper Ridgewood on the west side of town, and in 1929 it came here. And we've spoken so much this week about being stewards of the game of golf. I think we all feel that way. You know, all the volunteer members from the club, our membership in general. But in the late 20s, on the eve of the Depression, some very, very foresightful members decided to move the club to this location and to hire probably the best golf course architect working in this part of the country at the time, A.W. Tillinghast, to build 27 holes. And Clifford Wendehack, who was the guy to build clubhouses. He built Wingfoot, Mountain Ridge, North Jersey. So they hired probably the 2 best people they could have hired at the time to move the club here, and the rest is history.
It didn't take long for the reputation of Tillinghast's design to spread throughout the world of golf. Ridgewood would host its first major championship and welcome Walter Hagen, Gene Sarazen, and the finest American professionals of the day to this newly created masterpiece.
Ridgewood has a very, very rich history of hosting major championships. The greatest, perhaps, was the first, the 1935 Ryder Cup. George Jacobus was our head professional at the time, and he was the president of the PGA of America. And he brought this fledgling international competition between the UK and America to this site. Walter Hagen was the captain. The members of that Ryder Cup team were a who's who. There's a painting of the team in our clubhouse. Over your shoulder are some little windows in the roof of the clubhouse, and there are tiny, tiny little bedrooms there. That's where the players stayed. stayed. I mean, the Ryder Cup back then wasn't what it is now. There were no team rooms and fancy hotels. They were like 8x6 rooms they stayed in. That was the start. Now, we have hosted a number of USGA championships. The first was the 1957 United States Senior Championship. It was won by J. Clark Espy. We've had the Senior Open, we've had professional tournaments, we had the Senior PGA, we've had 3 Barclays, we had 1 Northern Trust, we had some LPGA events. By far, although this jury's still out this week, but by far the best week of my membership ever was the week we hosted the Girls Junior. It was 6 years ago. I'm certain by the end of this week it'll probably be a tie. My 2 favorite weeks as a member will be the week we hosted the Girls Junior and the week this week that we're hosting the U.S. Amateur Championship.
This year's U.S. Amateur marks the 5th USGA event to be hosted at Ridgewood. Jerry Pate captured the 1974 U.S. Amateur here. Lee Trevino won the U.S. Senior Open here in 1990. The most recent USGA champion to be crowned at Ridgewood? Eun-Young Song, the winner of the U.S. Girls Junior in 2016. Stroke play co-hosts, at times, fail to garner the same attention as the championship venue at a U.S. Amateur. But with its challenging layout and some of the fastest greens in the state of New Jersey, Arcola would hold its own as it has done for decades. The 122nd U.S. Amateur would add another chapter to Arcola's lengthy and impressive history of championship golf.
So Arcola's always hosted great championships. We, back in the day, in, I think the early 1900s to 1948, the U.S. Amateur was typically in the Northeast, so we hosted a tournament called the Arcola Cup. The best players in the world came to Arcola before the U.S. Amateur. They played here and then they moved on, and we've had people that won the Arcola Cup that went on to win the U.S. Amateur. Max Goodman, Johnny Goodman, Max Marston, to name a couple. In 2007, we revived the Arcola Cup, and our own Morgan Hoffman, who was the #1 amateur in the world at the time, won the first revival. And it still goes on to this day. We get the best players from not only the metropolitan area, but around the country to come play here on a 36-hole event. We've, in the last 5-6 years, we hosted the Met Amateur Championship. We hosted the New Jersey Amateur Championship. We had the Carey Cup a couple years ago, Ireland against the MGA. And next year we're hosting the Metropolitan Open, the biggest tournament in the Met. So we're no stranger to tournament golf here. And our whole staff, our superintendent, pro shop staff, everybody gets revved up for this. Tournaments, any tournaments.
With the pressure and demands of the national championship just a couple days away, players would need to use their time wisely to prepare for the challenge ahead. Final tweaks, last-minute notes, and perhaps a little time to reflect. You're here. You made it. You're in the U.S. Amateur. Every player enters the week with high expectations, especially the man from Eslöv, Sweden. Ludwig Aberg is the highest-ranked player in the field this week, the second-ranked amateur in the world. The first-team All-American from Texas Tech University could very well be competing in his final U.S. Amateur. The reigning Big 12 champion and Ben Hogan Award winner will return to Lubbock next season to help the Red Raiders chase a national championship, and then he will likely move to the professional ranks. On the bag this week for Aberg, his college coach, Greg Sands. When asked about Ludwig, Coach Sands said, "I'm not sure I'll ever coach another player quite like him."
Did want a break from coach for the week?
No, I haven't been around coach for 2 months now.
I know, you're like reacquainting.
Yeah, feels weird. He usually walks with me for a couple of tournaments every now and then, a couple of rounds. Yeah. So he's probably the one that sees me play the most. Because I have a swing coach back home, but he barely sees me play.
Right.
Which is kind of the issue, but coach is the one that watches me play up the most. So he knows my game, he knows my misses.
Despite all of his prior success and well-earned accolades, he knows that it all means nothing once the championship begins.
Last year when we played Oakmont, I didn't play very well. So I think that was a really good experience for me to actually, have some setbacks and kind of realize like, you gotta play well. Like, because Oakmont last year was hard. It was hard. But yeah, I mean, you want to play well. You don't want to mess it up. Like, that's just
It's once a
that's
year.
just like a competitor. Like,
Once a year.
yeah.
While the boys from North Carolina are looking ahead to a national championship run next spring, they're walking tall at Ridgewood, knowing that they owned the summer. 3 of the most prestigious trophies in amateur golf are heading back to Chapel Hill. Newcomer Dylan Minetti, a transfer from Pepperdine, defended his title at Wannamoisett to retain his Northeast Amateur crown. David Ford captured the Southern Amateur title in his home state of Georgia. With teammates Peter Fountain and Ryan Burnett rounding out today's foursome, it feels like any other school practice round, which means there is plenty of opportunity for trash talking, even from UNC head coach Andrew DiBattista.
Catering to each guy and trying to understand like their wants and their needs and what allows them to play really good golf. Like when I'm with him, the conversations are very different than when I'm with Greaser. You know, Greaser is much more like into the numbers, a bit more calculations. I mean, for him, we're just obviously trying to just get the ball forward, as you saw, like, you know, off that tee box.
Wow.
Good job, Pete.
Peter, you're on the same hole that you teed off on. What's that? No, one club.
We're gonna. See, that's what I'm talking about.
Okay, I understand. This appears to be going towards the green.
All right.
We'll take that.
Hey, I'm proud of you.
Hey,
I don't give a shit what your coach says. I'm proud of you.
And then also, too, the exciting part is really, for the first time in a long time, he will actually have clean clubs.
I was just noticing that that looks like it looks like you've done some sort of an NIL deal with Windex.
It's also better having these.
North Carolina's senior leader, however, decided to take a quieter approach to his preparation. The 3rd trophy captured this summer for the Tar Heels was the Western Amateur Championship, and it belongs to Austin Greaser. The Vandalia, Ohio native jumped into the spotlight last year after narrowly losing in the US Am Final. While he's looking ahead to this year's US Amateur, he's also remembering his magical week at Oakmont last year.
You know, I think it's a little bit of feel like unfinished business to some degree, but you know, I'm also looking at it as like looking back on that year, last year, saying, okay, this is what I did during that week that I felt like made it successful, and just trying to pick things from that week to harness and use during this week, and hopefully make another pretty deep run.
Another collegiate team that is well represented this week at the US Amateur is Vanderbilt University. The kids from Nashville caught fire last spring by winning 4 regular season tournaments, the SEC Championship, and the stroke play portion of the National Championship in Scottsdale. With 4 of last year's starting 5 returning next season, led by reigning individual national champion Gordon Sargent, the Commodores will have similar expectations to the Tar Heels and should be poised for a long week in the desert next spring. And while the familiarity of having teammates around during a practice round is comforting, once the first round starts on Monday, it's every man for themselves.
Feel a little bit more normal, a little more like you're not at the US Amateur, and instead it's just kind of a college event.
When we start off the first 2 holes, it's 520-yard par 5s with fairways about 7 yards wide. Then you kind of feel like you're at the USAM, but
I mean, you're one of the longest hitters in the field, I'd say.
I mean, it only took us like an hour and a half to play the first 3.
You know, that happens. There's guys out here that don't have the experience that you have, and they're kind of looking at this saying, oh gosh, what do I do?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. You definitely, I feel like every single practice round you kind of think the course is harder than it really is, but just keep it in front of you and go make some birdies, as the back of the range would say.
Vandy's elder statesman, Reed Davenport, enjoyed a quieter practice round away from his teammates as he looked to contend this week in New Jersey. The 2nd-team All-American from Austin, Texas, will return for a 5th season, hoping to help his team capture the first national championship in program history. Does he miss the team camaraderie today at Ridgewood? It doesn't appear so.
I'm out here by myself. Like I said, I haven't seen them. Yeah. I'm just trying to, I mean...
You're at the adult team?
Yeah, I am.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm just trying to do my homework without, I don't want to say distractions, but all.
While trouble is lurking around every green complex, Davenport's experience reminds him that there are still plenty of opportunities for solid shots to be rewarded this week.
100%. Like, I'm trying to remind myself, like, a 7-iron is still a 7-iron, and you should get at some of these pins. I mean, it doesn't mean you have to hit them to 45 feet from 160 yards, but at the same time, you do need to know, like, where your misses are, and I don't know, just taking advantage of the shots that you know you can take advantage of.
While 63 players were exempt from qualifying this year, 249 had to successfully navigate through a 36-hole qualifier. One of those players is Evan Vo. After a successful first year at Auburn that landed him on the SEC All-Freshman team, Evan is in the field this week after overcoming some adversity.
So I qualified at a small city near San Antonio. It was like gonna be 105, really hot. I slept fine. I woke up the next day. Tee time was about 8. It's irons only on the range, and I hit 20, 30 balls, and my body just felt like a wreck. I knew it wasn't the heat because, like, I practiced. I live in Austin. My body was like aching. I figured I was sick, but I just didn't know. Finished the first 18 at 8 under. I had no idea where I was at. I was just trying to survive. It was on autopilot, really. It was really weird. I have like a 45-minute break in between rounds, and I literally go in the clubhouse. I put like 2 chairs facing each other, and I just like go to sleep. And I don't know how I made it to the second 18, but I guess here I am.
The man they call Thor is no stranger to difficult USGA championship setups. Michael Thorbjornsson, the 2018 U.S. Junior Amateur Champion, made his second U.S. Open appearance earlier this summer at the Country Club. The Wellesley, Mass. native is one of the few players in the field this week that qualified to compete at Brookline in June. So it begs the question, how does the setup at Ridgewood compare to this year's U.S. Open setup?
This place is tougher than the U.S. Open.
Tougher than the U.S. Open?
Yeah.
Really?
Yes.
Okay, how so?
It's longer, conditions are the same, it's windier, it's gonna swirl. I mean, I felt like the U.S. Open course, like Brookline, was more straightforward. It was just like more, I don't know, just more character to each hole. Like each hole is very different from like the previous, and it's tough. You gotta play well here. Every single part of your game needs to be top notch.
Michael wasn't the only player in the field to recognize the challenges that Ridgewood will present this week.
I think you just got to know that it's a hard golf course. People are going to make bogeys. It's going to happen. But, you know, managing your game, you know, making pars, playing smart golf, you know, that's what it's going to come down to is, you know, who's playing the best, who's managing their game the best, and who's carrying that confidence with them. Well, I started on, 9 today? And it was 500 yards on 9, 10's 500 yards, and then you got a 250-yard par 3 back to back to back. So it's like, it seems like you never get a break out here. But you know, that's what we want. You know, it's going to be a great test, and I think it's going to be a fun week.
Yeah, driving's obviously a really key part of this event, as I think a lot of USGA events, just because they get the rough pretty thick, and you know, just fairway is just such a premium out here. So yeah, just trying to dial my driver in. Was able to find a really good target that I was able to just kind of nail it on. So obviously the grass is pretty similar. Just the feel off the turf and the fairways, the rough. The greens are a little different here, but you know, they do have some similarities. So excited. It's kind of similar type of golf. So really excited for the week though.
I think it's the rough. When you miss the fairway, the rough is really thick in those aspects. Usually around the green is kind of where the thickness of the rough comes into play, but out here, the rough's super thick when you miss the fairway, meaning you got no chance of advancing it to the green like it's a layup. And then you got some weird green complexes. I think it's 14 or 13, the par 4, where it's all back to front, and you literally have 10 feet to work with. So yeah, it's going to give people fits. So you just got to be patient out here, and you know, if you make bogey, it's not the end of the world.
With the exception of the 2009 and 2014 U.S. Amateurs, championships that he did not attempt to qualify for, Stuart Hagerstad hasn't missed a U.S. Amateur in 14 years. He's 7 for 7 in U.S. amateur qualifying attempts. With all of his experience, it's not surprising that the reigning U.S. Mid-Amateur champion arrives in New Jersey with the mindset of a veteran that's seen and done just about everything in the amateur game.
So you're playing in your 13th U.S. Am, and you got a couple guys in your practice run group that this is their first. Does that kind of bring back memories a little bit? Like, I know you're so far removed from that, but still just seeing a couple guys with like their first taste of this.
No, it's cool. Yeah. I mean, it's an amazing accomplishment, and the USGA, they run a pretty fantastic set of championships every year, and the opportunity to experience that once, let alone 13 times for the US AMs, it's pretty special.
This kind of fits though you, because this is the kids that just pull driver everywhere, they're going to be in trouble if they're not hitting fairways. So it almost feels like to me like a lot of the field you're going to not have to worry about a lot of the field that are doing that.
Mid-Am last year to now have the chance to play in the US Open. So when you get the chance to kind of compare anything to an event like that,
right,
it certainly gives you not just a lot of confidence, but also a lot of perspective in the sense that that's as hard as it's going to get.
Right.
So if you can handle that and kind of handle your own and test your game against the world's best, it's a great kind of barometer of what you need to be able to do well, how you need to play, and then to take that to other venues.
As players wrapped up their final practice rounds at Ridgewood and Arcola, it became abundantly clear that if they planned on making a deep run in this year's championship, they would need to avoid the deep rough of both of these Jersey masterpieces. And with putting surfaces running north of 12 on the Stimpmeter, they would have to gather their composure and demonstrate touch and feel to secure their spot in match play. These are the best amateurs in the world, and their journey begins tomorrow at the 122nd United States Amateur Championship.